There is something implausible in the dynamics of human evolution. Somehow, a branch-leaping animal managed to become bipedal within a short period, and then invent color television and even fly into space. Is there an invisible force that guides us without us knowing it? What if we have been under surveillance since ancient times? Is everything really as straightforward as previously believed regarding the origin of humanity on our planet? These questions cannot be easily dismissed. Indeed, scientists and enthusiasts in various countries have been searching for answers for several decades. There is also a whole range of issues that remain scientifically unexplained. These include UFOs, which has led to a new scientific field called ufology. In 1928, K.E. Tsiolkovsky wrote the book The Will of the Universe, Unknown Intelligent Forces. In it, he writes, "I know many worthy people who have seen extraterrestrial intelligences on our planet, and I was also a witness. Until now, we have not allowed for the possibility of other beings in earthly life. We can hardly imagine anything superior to earthly beings in terms of their qualities and technical means. This limited perspective is why we do not consider the possibility of intervention by other beings in earthly affairs." Tsiolkovsky also said, "It is reasonable to assume that an extraterrestrial super-civilization would be capable of penetrating any planet, including Earth. On a clear moonless night, the naked eye can distinguish several thousand stars in the sky. When using a telescope, hundreds of millions of stars can be observed. However, even high-powered instruments cannot capture everything. Mathematical analysis estimates the number of stars in our star system, the Milky Way, to be around 1 sextillion. The size of our galaxy is 85,000 light-years. A light-year is the distance a beam of light travels in 1 year at a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second. Our galaxy, a stellar system, is surrounded by others whose number is also enormous, approximately 10 billion. According to estimates conducted by various scientists, there may be up to 100 billion planets in our galaxy with conditions suitable for the emergence of life. A reasonable estimate by astronomer Frank Drake suggests that there are about 1,000 civilizations in the Milky Way ready to contact us. Despite the vast range of estimates, the conclusion is clear: we are not unique. Since the SETI program began in 1960, around 50 observations have been conducted in various countries. Approximately 120,000 hours of radio searches have also been performed. Unfortunately, this labor-intensive and costly search for extraterrestrial signals has so far brought nothing but crushing disappointment. It remains silent either because we are alone in the universe, which is unlikely, or because the language and methods of information exchange that exist among extraterrestrial civilizations are utterly incomprehensible to us. Do we even need contact with alien intelligence? What could it bring to humanity, benefit or harm? This question is worth contemplating. Some scientists have serious concerns about potential negative or irreversible consequences of contact, and the arguments are pretty substantial. They mostly boil down to examples of weaker earthly civilizations being suppressed by more powerful and advanced civilizations, which often leads to the weaker group being completely dominated. Indigenous tribes in America, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, and the numerous small ethnic groups have all experienced this impact. In scientific and technological terms, the idea of a young earthly civilization independently traversing its allotted path to full maturity and flourishing, even with occasional setbacks along the way, seems preferable. An extraterrestrial civilization could even pass along information of a harmful nature. However, it seems more likely that a super-civilization entering into contact with a younger partner would be humane and cautious. In 1971, following an international conference in Burican on the issues of contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, eminent scientists from various countries, including Nobel Prize laureates, formulated the following resolution: if extraterrestrial civilizations are discovered, it will have a profound impact on the scientific and technological progress of humanity. This discovery would positively influence the future of human knowledge. Today, increasing attention is given to the idea that the entire galaxy, including our solar system, was colonized by one or more super civilizations many, many years ago. However, they clearly do not show their presence at this time to avoid influencing our primitive life. Galactic ethics should allow us to resolve our developmental crises independently, albeit under close supervision. In that case, how different are we from a child left in a playpen? Among scientists, this view is known as the galactic quarantine hypothesis. According to the theory of the Big Bang, a point-like, superheated, and super-dense clump of matter exploded around 14 billion years ago. Following this, the expansion of this superheated cloud began. Matter spread out, filling space and forming clusters in various places. The complex interaction of radiation led to the formation of hydrogen. The radiation cooled to a temperature slightly above absolute zero. This radiation, called relic radiation, was discovered in 1965 and still persists. This fact strengthened the hypothesis that expansion was preceded by contraction, i.e., the pulsating universe hypothesis. But something else is even more striking. A careful reading of ancient Indian, Sanskrit, and Chinese religious texts, along with ancient myths, reveals that the scientific ideas and discoveries of the late 20th century are far from new and were even mentioned in the Old Testament. Ancient Indian hymns paint a picture very close to modern cosmological theories, and in ancient Chinese manuscripts, one can read about the birth of the world from nothing. This raises the legitimate question of the source of such unique knowledge in ancient times. From the particles dispersed by the explosion, clouds formed, which turned into stars, and from them, giant clusters, galaxies were formed. Planets formed around stars. Our unremarkable star, the Sun, has already existed for approximately 5 billion years and will radiate energy for another 5 billion years before extinguishing. Exactly how and when the planets of the solar system formed remains unknown. Various estimates give Earth an age of more than 4 billion years. Earth was a fiery sphere that cooled, settled into its orbit, and took on its current form. The Earth's crust and atmosphere appeared. As it cooled, heavy rains poured down, forming seas and oceans fed by salty rivers. Finally, a thick, warm, salty soup formed, from which the birth of life from non-life occurred. Several decades ago, the Soviet biologist A.I. Oparin suggested that 20 primary amino acid molecules were formed from particles of this soup in the atmosphere. The formation of these molecules sparked the appearance of diverse life forms on Earth. Many still adhere to this scheme without undue doubt. However, it is based only on the assumption that a random combination of tiny particles over millions of years led to the formation of a protein molecule. Mathematical calculations have shown that the probability of such an event is minuscule, practically zero, and even if such an event were to occur somewhere, it would never be repeated. Recently, scientists from the Faculty of Applied Mathematics at Cardiff University convincingly demonstrated that there would be neither time nor starting components to experimentally confirm such a random development of events. Here is their reasoning. We assume that the primary soup consisted of 20 basic amino acids in equal concentrations, though achieving even this would be difficult. With caution, let's assume that a minimum of 10 functional variants are needed for each protein to be biologically active. 2010 trials would be required to obtain just one working protein. The probability of its formation by purely random means would be the number obtained after dividing one by 2010, an incredibly tiny number that should not even be considered. Before the probability reaches the necessary value, i.e., close to 1, the number of necessary attempts would exceed the number of atoms in all the stars of the universe. Waiting for 100 small watch parts thrown into a mixer to assemble into a complete watch would be more feasible. Thus, the only scientifically accepted hypothesis of Oparin was called into deep question. Leading English astrophysicist Fred Hoyle has consistently pointed out that life, especially in its higher intelligent stage, could never have arisen independently on Earth. From this, we are forced to consider that life on Earth is a cosmic phenomenon. Oparin's hypothesis was quickly embraced and widely popularized. In textbooks, it is presented almost as an axiom, although it remains merely a hypothesis. not a strict theory grounded in convincing experimental data. Yet for some reason, another idea put forward by Russian scientist V.I. Vernadsky, who discovered the biosphere of our planet, was completely ignored. He approached the greatest scientific mystery of our time by asking, is it really that only a barely noticeable film of intelligence on an infinitesimally small point in the universe, Earth, that possesses fundamental special properties, while everywhere else death reigns? Vernadsky pondered in 1922 in his article, The Beginning and Eternity of Life. Life is not an accidental phenomenon in world evolution, but is closely related to it as a consequence. Life is a cosmic phenomenon, not solely an earthly one. Life was brought to Earth, and Earth may also serve as a nursery of life. Earthly creatures are a creation of a complex cosmic process, a necessary and natural part of a harmonious cosmic mechanism with no room for randomness. Despite the diversity of organic life forms on Earth, they possess a unique shared feature, the unified genetic code of both plant and animal life. This alphabet of life consists of 20 amino acids and 4 nucleotides. Using this unshaken fact, proponents of the theory that life originated in the distant depths of space argue that the uniformity of the genetic code is due only to the fact that all life on Earth owes its birth to a single ancestor, a molecule that mysteriously arrived on Earth billions of years ago and found favorable conditions for reproduction here. Only a sowing performed from space can explain this fact, claim American biologists Crick and Orgel. At the end of the last century, Swedish chemist Arrhenius proposed an unexpected and extravagant hypothesis, panspermia, according to which life on our planet was sown by living bacteria-like seeds scattered in space, which after a long journey randomly found themselves on Earth. But this hypothesis was quickly debunked. It was shown that no germ could withstand the harsh cosmic radiation. Moreover, the likelihood of randomly sent messengers reaching Earth was extremely low. So in our time, the hypothesis was updated as directed panspermia, suggesting that an unknown supercivilization might have deliberately infected Earth with seeds of life placed in protective containers. However, this hypothesis should be further refined in light of the fascinating results obtained by scientist V.I. Kaznachev. 2 glass vials were filled with groups of microbes. One contained healthy microbes and the other virus-infected ones. The vials stood nearby and saw each other for a time. The supposedly healthy microbes were then introduced into test animals, with surprising results. The animals contracted the same virus that infected the microbes in the other vessel. This led to the single obvious conclusion. The virus was transmitted through light electromagnetic waves, overcoming the glass walls and passing information about the disease to healthy cells. These cells recorded this information in their memory, and upon entering the bodies of these animals, transmitted it. This method was named energy information exchange. This exchange, triggered by directed modulated electromagnetic radiation from space, could have led to the emergence of specific building blocks in Earth's soup, essentially amino acids with a predetermined genetic code. Here is another remarkably simple but compelling argument in favor of the idea that life on Earth originated from outside, presented by Crick and Orgel at the International Symposium in Burican in 1971. Molybdenum, which is part of numerous molecular compounds essential for the existence of life, plays a crucial, if not decisive, role in supporting life on Earth. It cannot be replaced by anything else. Now, everything would be obvious if this metal were abundant on Earth. However, its concentration here is barely 0.02%, while the concentrations of related elements like chromium and nickel are tens and hundreds of times higher. Yet the chemical composition of a planet must necessarily correspond to the biostructure of its inhabitants. The mystery of molybdenum remains unsolved. There may be other planets in space where molybdenum is much more common, and their chemical structure matches the structure of living organisms on Earth. From single-celled to multicellular organisms, from fish to amphibians, from reptiles to birds, from primates to humans, this is the accepted scheme for the emergence of intelligent life on Earth. This process apparently took hundreds of millions of years, but even this period has raised many unresolved mysteries. Here's one such question. In the late Mesozoic era, an extraordinary extinction of dinosaurs occurred, giving rise to a class of highly organized vertebrate animals. Their almost instantaneous disappearance is usually linked to a sudden change in environmental conditions, which, however, did not affect other inhabitants. In our time, researchers have discovered not just isolated fossil remains of dinosaurs, but massive cemeteries of them, as if they all hurried to the same place to say goodbye before dying. These sites have been found in the Gobi Desert and Africa. It appears as though massive, powerful creatures that could literally trample the beginnings of any approaching intelligent life all perish simultaneously. It is believed that humans and the great apes share a common ancestor, Dryopithecus, from which two branches evolved simultaneously and, under the same conditions, gradually diverged. Yet one branch suddenly developed intelligence, while the other remains climbing trees and is still part of the animal world. There is no satisfactory explanation for this striking fact. In 1891, the remains of an ape man were first found on the island of Java. His cranial capacity was 900 cubic centimeters, compared to 500 in the gorilla and 1,400 in modern humans. This individual, who lived approximately 500,000 to 600,000 years ago, was named Pithecanthropus. In China near Beijing, the remains of a later ancestor, Sinanthropus, were discovered. His cranial capacity was already 1,000 cubic centimeters, and he lived around 400,000 years ago. In Germany's Neander Valley, the remains of another ape man who lived 200,000 years ago were found. One of the later types of Neanderthal lived 50,000 years ago. Muscular and stocky, his brain volume was, surprisingly, slightly larger than ours. He already had a developed language, and unlike Pithecanthropus and Sinanthropus, even buried his ancestors. There are no major issues for scientists regarding this period of human development, but much later, 20,000, 30,000 years ago, evolution presented us with a great puzzle, one that paleontologists and anthropologists are struggling to solve. In France's Cro-Magnon cave, the remains of the Cro-Magnon, the immediate ancestor of modern humans, were discovered. He was tall, intelligent, and handsome. Compared to him, the stocky Neanderthal who lived alongside him seemed downright grotesque. Cro-Magnon wore clothing sewn from animal skins, painted on rocks, and maintained a lunar calendar. He could never have developed his abilities if he hadn't inherited them from another cycle of civilization about which we know nothing. Evolution took hundreds of thousands of years to produce the Neanderthal from an ape. If such a long period was necessary to create this hairy, unattractive, semi-wild creature, how could the completely different Cro-Magnon have emerged in just a few thousand years? It took horses 60 million years to attain their modern form, and the ant has changed hardly at all in 150 million years. There is something implausible and troubling, like a toothache, in this brief outline of human evolution, where a branch-leaping animal in a vastly shorter period managed to become bipedal, invent color television, and even travel to space. Perhaps, as the classics of dialectical materialism asserted, labor made humans out of apes. Yet the once unthinkable and even heretical question arises with increasing frequency: whose labor? This question is posed, for instance, by Nobel laureate Francis Crick, the discoverer of the double helix of the DNA molecule and proponent of the hypothesis of directed panspermia. Other viewpoints are also being considered. Some form of intelligent life in the universe may have been the first to develop, initiating cosmic expansion by sending seeds of life to planets to create the necessary living conditions. When life on Earth reached the required level, experimenters arrived and modified the genetic properties of the hominids that already existed here, guiding mutation in the desired direction. Thanks to directed mutation, hominids eventually acquired the one thing they lacked: intelligence. Signs in the sky. There is no doubt that we can join the cosmic community, or in other words, make contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. However, only when we achieve the necessary intellectual level and are psychologically ready will we be able to achieve it. Now, clearly, this will be determined by our response to the seemingly meaningless and chaotic anomalous phenomena, by our ability to recognize and understand them. Until then, we appear to remain objects of observation and study, watched unknowingly by mysterious observers of Earth as a cosmic test tube, where the experimenters have created all the necessary conditions for the experiment. This concept requires further explanation. Let us try to gather together strange observations of phenomena occurring in near space, recorded by many observers. As is well known, Earth is the third planet in the solar system, situated 150 million kilometers from the Sun. This fact, along with Earth's rotation around its axis, allowing the warming of its atmosphere and surface, has led to a unique situation where the temperature variation ranges from approximately 60 degrees below zero to 60 degrees above zero. It's as if Earth's temperature range was designed for optimal conditions to stimulate and sustain the development of life here. If Earth were a few million kilometers closer to or farther from the Sun, the temperature would be entirely different, resulting in either searing heat or cosmic cold, making survival for unprotected organisms impossible. Based on the laws of motion, astrophysicists have determined why the planets began orbiting the Sun upon the formation of our system. It is believed that to satisfy all balance laws, the planets orbiting the Sun should always be oriented toward it with one side. However, the fact that the planets receive some impulse for additional motion, rotating along their orbits while also spinning like tops around their axes, defies all known laws of cosmic mechanics. No one knows how to approach an explanation for this fact, and the matter becomes even more complex, given that different planets rotate in different directions. Another equally curious fact: by examining the number of ring growths in ancient marine corals linked to periodic solar light changes, American paleontologists recently proved that in the Paleozoic era, i.e. 400–500 million years ago, the Earth's year had 400 days instead of the 365 we have now, which would have required Earth to be located on a more distant orbit, approximately 160 million kilometers from the Sun. Similar conclusions based on other data were reached by German geophysicist Schmidt. This result has been tentatively explained by tidal friction between ocean water and Earth's surface, which could have slowed the planet's axial rotation, reducing the number of hours in a day to 22. However, this fact has yet to be convincingly proven. Furthermore, the opposite phenomenon could occur with ebbs. Transitioning from one orbit to another would necessitate changing the calendar system, and historians confirm that such changes indeed took place. The next planets after Earth are Mars and Jupiter. Astronomers have long been intrigued by the empty space between Mars and Jupiter, which is now filled with thousands of large and small asteroids. Mathematical estimates suggest that if all the asteroid belt material were molded into a planet, it would be similar in size to the Moon. Current theories do not rule out the possibility that a planet named Phaeton once occupied this space and was destroyed for unknown reasons. Interestingly, in ancient Sumerian texts, Armenian researcher Zechariah Sitchin found references confirming the mysterious destruction of this planet due to a collision with another massive body. Incidentally, the Sumerians believed that there were 12 planets in the solar system, not 9 as is currently accepted. But an even more intriguing possibility emerges. If one of the planets were taken out of commission, it would inevitably destabilize the entire solar system, forcing planets into new orbits. If Earth descended closer to the Sun, it would warm from its previous state of eternal cold. Such destabilization could explain the significant variance in the orbital radii of asteroids rotating where Phaeton once existed, which remains a mystery. The Moon. What do we know about it? Quite a bit, actually. The Moon's gravitational influence stabilizes Earth's axis of rotation. Without the Moon, Earth would experience catastrophic temperature swings that would be detrimental to life. Just a slight shift in the Moon could instantly result in disasters on Earth. As for the origin of our unique bodyguard, this question remains a mystery. Only one thing is reliably proven. The Moon could not have been naturally captured by Earth from space to take its orbit and become a satellite. Until recently, the prevailing theory was that the moon was part of Earth that separated during its formation or due to a massive meteorite impact that broke off a portion of Earth. However, after the American Apollo missions to the moon, it was established that Earth and the moon differ significantly in composition. According to some American scientists, the moon even turned out to be older than Earth, thus sharpening the question, where did the moon come from? In 1975, a book titled The Strange Spacecraft, The Moon, published by the Institute of Physics in the United States, presented evidence of the moon's artificial origin. This was obtained through explosions on its surface, analyzing the size and depth of its craters and studying its oscillations. However, there is an even more astonishing mystery related to a moon, but this time it is Venus's. If one looks through all astronomical reference books, it becomes apparent that Venus is one of the 2 planets in the solar system that has no satellites. There is no reason to distrust reputable academic sources or suspect them of oversight or errors. On the other hand, one can hardly doubt the observations and even the recording of Venus's moon by respected and authoritative scientists. On the early morning of January 25, 1672, the great Italian astronomer Cassini noticed an unfamiliar object near Venus. He observed it for 10 minutes but decided not to announce his sensational discovery of Venus's satellite. On August 18, 1686, he saw it again. The satellite was large, about a quarter the size of Venus and more than half the planet's diameter away. On October 23, 1740, Englishman Short spotted an object near Venus at a distance of a third of the planet's diameter. Over the next 30 years, astronomers from various countries observed the satellite repeatedly until their work was officially registered. King Frederick the Great of Prussia named Venus's satellite after the French scientist D'Alembert. What happened next was even more mysterious. The Venusian baby disappeared for a whole century. It reappeared in 1886 and was last observed by American astronomer Barnard in 1892, after which the restless offspring of the goddess of love vanished once more, never to be seen again. During the strange satellite's first century-long disappearance, there was a massive uproar over another astronomical discovery. On March 20, 1859, Dr. Lescarbault from France discovered a new planet in an intramercurial orbit. The director of the Paris Observatory reviewed all the observations and calculations and was satisfied. In 1860, at a meeting of the French Academy of Sciences, the new planet was named Vulcan, and Lescarbault was awarded the Legion of Honor. However, as France celebrated, the matter suddenly grew complicated. Vulcan stopped appearing in telescopic eyepieces and unexpectedly disappeared. 18 years later, it reappeared, this time with a different Vulcan, but soon they both vanished for good. All observations were accurate, yet it remains unknown what object astronomers saw. Was it an asteroid or a giant space platform from another world traveling in the galaxy? A mysterious spindle-shaped object has been recorded at various times, with records preserved in the Chernihiv Chronicle of 1703. A few years ago, a Soviet automatic probe approached Mars and transmitted an astonishing image. The surface of Mars clearly showed the shadow of a gigantic elliptical object. Shortly after this, the probe mysteriously disappeared, and nothing has been heard from it since. The study of anomalous phenomena. Examining numerous anomalous phenomena on the Sun, Moon, and in nearby space, Italian ufologist M. Burrasconi noted that these phenomena follow regular intervals, occurring approximately every 20 years. Comparing this interval with planetary orbital periods, he found that every 19.86 years, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun align. During these alignments, very pronounced anomalous phenomena have been observed. By analyzing the Saturn-Sun system as a giant clock with Saturn orbiting the Sun, like the hour hand, it was possible to identify an active time sector over an extended period, since 190 AD, consistently marked by observations of phenomena, including sharply increased UFO activity. In 1986, British radio astronomer Duncan Lunan discovered a remarkable phenomenon, a double radio echo while sending radio pulses into space. The first was the reflection of radio waves from the ionosphere, but the second was due to some strange, invisible object between Earth and the Moon. Most surprising was that the second echo was detected at varying intervals. Lunar, accounting for signals from UFOs, unexpectedly produced a stellar map of the sky as it was 13,000 years ago. It was concluded that this unknown object has been in orbit around Earth for just that long. The mysterious object orbiting Earth continues to be observed, but only when it passes across the lunar disk. Therefore, astronomers gave it the name Black Prince. Astronomers were left utterly astonished when studying its trajectory. Typically, planetary satellites orbit in the same direction as the planet's axial rotation due to the gravitational field of the planet, which a natural cosmic body cannot overcome without colossal artificial energy sources. That's why all artificial Earth satellites are launched in the direction of Earth's rotation. However, the Black Prince turned out to be moving against this rotation. Clearly, such a fact contradicts all earthly scientific representations and concepts, which is why, for a long time, few people knew about the Black Prince. In 1967, American astronomer Bigby discovered 10 small moons with strange trajectories. By rewinding these trajectories backward, he found that on December 18, 1955, all these Earth satellites had been a single object. Interestingly, this date coincided with a flare in the sky observed by astronomers at the time. Thus, it was suggested that an alien spacecraft had exploded in Earth's orbit, leaving 10 invisible fragments, the largest of which is several dozen meters in size. By traveling to these fragments, answers to many questions could be found. Recently, residents of Bucharest observed a series of markings resembling the vapor trail of a jet in the sky. First, 2 question marks, then 2 2s with a minus sign between them, followed by 2 7s, then 3 7s, and algebraic greater than symbols. Then everything disappeared, only to reappear after some time. This repeated several times. In other places, squares and triangles were observed in the sky. In England, Germany, and other countries, strange symbols have frequently been discovered in the early morning on wheat fields, formed by carefully arranged plant stalks. Clearly, someone wants to tell us something, warn us, or perhaps invite us to contact and dialogue. But are we ready? The previously mentioned facts, along with many others, suggest that since time immemorial, the development of our young earthly civilization has been under the constant and careful attention of an unknown, highly developed civilization, or even more than one, as some researchers believe. Contacts with humanity in ancient times were more open and direct. Today, such contacts still occur, often through the transmission of mental symbols. However, known contacts are generally random and unexpected, giving rise to numerous rumors, myths, and disbelief. If a group of humanoids were to land at a large public demonstration or rally, many questions would be answered. But for some reason, this does not happen. And if something like this does happen, it is immediately veiled in silence. According to some independently decoded signals, the year 2030 is frequently mentioned as a turning point, an idea strangely echoed in the ancient sacred text, the Bible, in its second part, the New Testament, written in the 2nd-3rd century AD. The New Testament contains a section called the Apocalypse, which translates from ancient Greek as Revelation. This section includes a prophecy of the end of the world at the mentioned turning point and describes in detail how it will unfold. Interpreting this prophecy from a modern perspective is not simple, but when one considers the deadly ecological crisis looming over Earth and the presence of nuclear and biological weapons capable of spiraling out of control, the self-destruction of earthly civilization becomes a real possibility. Any comments on the apocalypse's predictions would be inappropriate. Nonetheless, when contacts on Earth were educational, the teachers from the heavens left people with a warning later recorded in a religious document. This warning may have been based on a calculated probability of some astronomical event in the solar system that could destroy life on Earth. Is this what they want to warn us about? And how long will we pretend that no one is home? Paradoxes of ancient knowledge. In our entrenched views of the past, a Neolithic ancestor was always depicted as a shaggy fellow chasing a mammoth. But unexpected discoveries began pouring in, one after another. Who were our ancestors? It seemed this question had long been exhaustively answered, with a gradual development of human understanding of the surrounding world. From stone tools to space rockets, from generation to generation, accumulating knowledge. In our established view of the past, a Neolithic ancestor was always portrayed as a shaggy fellow with a club, grunting and scratching as he chased down a fleeing mammoth. His entire life focuses, it seems, was limited to the mundane pursuit of daily bread. However, as archaeology, paleontology, and other sciences have developed, unexpected discoveries began pouring in. These discoveries force us to reconsider our understanding of the intellectual abilities and technical skills of people and nations that have long vanished. It turns out that ancient people were highly knowledgeable in astronomy, were skilled engineers and metallurgists, understood the secrets of the human body, and, in their free time, built multi-ton stone computers. Where did our ancestors acquire such knowledge? Who were the teachers of the ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Indians, Chinese, and Greeks? Born in antiquity and declined during the Middle Ages, science was rediscovered by the Arabs, restored during the Renaissance, and developed by the modern scientific world. The world has a rectangular shape and stretches from Iberia to India and from Africa to Scythia. Its four sides are formed by high mountains on which the heavenly dome rests. The earth is a giant-sized chest, and on its lid lie all seas and countries. The sky is the lid of this chest, and the mountains are its walls. This naive view of the earth was presented in Christian topography, written in the 6th century. But 1,000 years earlier, people had more accurate ideas about the earth. Pythagoras, 6th century BC, taught in his school that the earth is spherical. Aristarchus of Samos, 3rd century BC, believed that the earth orbits the sun, while Eratosthenes, the librarian of Alexandria, 3rd century BC, calculated the earth's circumference with an accuracy of 30 kilometers. Until the second half of the 19th century, scientists estimated Earth's age to be several thousand years. In comparison, ancient Brahmins set the lifespan of Earth and our universe at 4.3 billion years, very close to modern estimates. The history of our science has its tides. Waves of progress alternated with periods of destruction and persecution. In 1000 AD, Dominican monk Giordano Bruno was burned alive at the Campo dei Fiori in Rome as a heretic. He claimed that many suns with planets orbiting them existed in the cosmos. This brilliant insight, attributed to Bruno and 400 years ahead of his time, had been voiced 2,000 years earlier. The ancient philosopher Anaximenes, who believed in the existence of numerous inhabited worlds, told the disappointed Alexander the Great that he had conquered only one Earth, while many such Earths exist in the cosmos. Today we are rediscovering forgotten sciences. 350 years ago, Johannes Kepler accurately determined that tides were caused by the moon's gravitational pull and was immediately persecuted. But as early as the 2nd century BC, Babylonian astronomer Seleucus spoke of the influence of the moon on ocean and sea waters. A century before the New Era, Posidonius concluded correctly that tides were related to the moon's orbit around Earth. In 2500 BC, Chinese astronomers told their emperor that the Earth floated in space. Yet 400 years ago, Galileo was condemned by church authorities for similar views. In the 5th century BC, Diogenes of Apollonia asserted that meteorites moved through space and rarely fell to Earth. But in the 18th century, the French Academy, through its prominent figure Lavoisier, solemnly declared that stones could not fall from the sky because they had nothing to hold on to up there. Believe it or not, the Suez Canal is not a recent construction. It was begun by the Egyptian pharaohs 6 centuries BC and continued under the Persian king Darius. The Great Wall of China was constructed 22 centuries ago by 3 million workers over a span of 40 years. The wall is about 2,500 kilometers long and up to 15 meters high. A modern car could easily drive along its top. 5,000 years ago, the Egyptian pharaoh Menes undertook a grand engineering project to alter the course of the Nile River. a feat unparalleled in history. One of the seven wonders of the ancient world was the Lighthouse of Alexandria, standing at 135 meters tall. Built in 250 BCE, it lasted for about 1,500 years until it was destroyed by an earthquake. The lighthouse, constructed from white marble on the island of Pharos, had a movable mirror on its tower that reflected light visible from 400 kilometers away at night, using sunlight by day and fire by night. Our aviation and space engineers have a predecessor in antiquity, Hero of Alexandria with his jet engine. The first cyberneticians were preceded by Daedalus, who had automatons and robots. Modern science has roots that reach far back in time. An extraordinary discovery was made in recent years in Costa Rica. Hundreds of perfectly round stone spheres, up to 2.5 meters in size, were found in the jungle. The largest ones weigh 16 tons. Some groups of spheres form geometric shapes, while others indicate geographic directions. In Mexico, massive stone heads weighing up to 40 tons have been found. They rest on stone pedestals, similar to the Costa Rican spheres. These heads were crafted more than 3,000 years ago, yet the nearest stone quarries are located 100 kilometers away. How did they transport them? In the courtyard of a mosque in Delhi stands an iron pillar weighing 6 tons and reaching a height of 7.5 meters. It has been exposed to tropical elements for 15 centuries, yet it bears no trace of rust. Producing such large monolithic pieces of non-oxidizing iron is still impossible today, and it's unknown if it will ever be achievable. The metallurgical achievements of South American Indians also remain unexplained. Ornamental items made from pure platinum were found in Ecuador. To create such ornaments, they would first need to melt the platinum and then shape it. In Europe, platinum was first smelted 200 years ago at around 2,000 degrees Celsius. How did the Indians, centuries ago, achieve such high temperatures? Certainly not with burning sticks, that's for sure. In the 1950s, copper mines were discovered in the Great Lakes region of the United States. Using radioisotope analysis, the mines were dated back 6,000 years. North American Indians were hunters, fishermen, and herders, with no traditions associated with metal extraction. Yet, according to experts, 200,000 tons of pure metal were mined there. The biography of all copper known to exist in North America is well documented, including where it was mined, how much was extracted, and where it is now. But these 200,000 tons appear to have vanished. Who mined this copper, and where did such a vast quantity go? The tomb of the Chinese Emperor Zhou Shu, who lived 1,700 years ago, presented a new mystery. Spectral analysis of a metal belt from this tomb showed that it consists of a combination of metals, including aluminum. Pure aluminum was first produced in 1825, and after combining it with other metals was mastered much later. Thus, the decoration of a 3rd century ruler appears strange and doesn't fit the stereotypical view of antiquity. The Natural History Museum in London exhibits a human skull found in a cave in northern Rhodesia, belonging to a person who lived 40,000 years ago. There is a small round hole on the left side of the skull, with no radial cracks, which would typically be present with cold weapon injuries. The right side of the skull is shattered. Skulls of soldiers killed by bullets exhibit a similar appearance. At the Paleontological Museum in Moscow, there is a bison skull from hundreds of thousands of years ago with a round hole in the forehead, also without radial cracks. It, too, resembles a bullet wound. Ancient astronomical knowledge is widely known. However, how this knowledge was obtained and where it originated remains unanswered. How did Sumerian astronomers manage to calculate the Earth's year with an accuracy of 3 minutes and the moon's orbit around Earth with even greater precision? Who gave them the knowledge to calculate the complete cycle of stellar movement across the sky, totaling 25,290 years? In one Berlin museum, one can see a Sumerian seal that depicts the solar system. Ancient African tribes, the Dogon, knew about the spiral shape of the galaxy, a second dark star in the Sirius system, only recently discovered with modern optics, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn's rings. In Brittany, cave wall drawings were found that were interpreted as prehistoric astronomical maps. What practical interest could Stone Age hunters have had in astronomy? A large number of these drawings have been discovered, and these findings call for a revision of our views on the intellectual abilities of late Ice Age humans. 25 centuries before the lunar expeditions, Democritus declared, "The marks on the moon are shadows of high mountains and deep valleys." "It is the moon that blocks the sun during solar eclipses," asserted Anaxagoras, who was the first to realize that during lunar eclipses, Earth's shadow falls on the moon. An ancient Brahmanic legend claims that life on Earth was created by patriarchs who descended from the moon. Until Galileo, supposedly no one knew about sunspots, yet 2,000 years before him, Chinese astronomers were already recording them. Babylonian priests knew of the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, as well as the moons of Saturn. But how did they acquire this information? Heraclitus and the followers of Pythagoras recognized each star as the center of a planetary system. Democritus believed that worlds are born and die, and only some of these worlds near stars are suitable for life. So what is this? Brilliant guesses or inherited knowledge? If these were merely assumptions, why were they so similar across distant and unrelated regions? The ancient inhabitants of England were even more knowledgeable in astronomy than the priests of Egypt or the Sumerians. Ancient Mexico also possessed an incredibly high level of astronomy. Modern astronomical data places the year's duration at 365.242 days and the lunar month at 29.53059 days. The ancient Mayans, who lacked chronometers and other precise instruments, calculated these same values with a difference only in the 4th decimal place. We might reasonably assume that ancient people could have some understanding of the cosmic depths and the structure of the solar system, as such knowledge might be acquired through simple visual observations and comparisons. However, there is also evidence that they had knowledge in areas beyond simple human vision, in the realm of the microscopic. Moreover, ancient scientists emphasized the unity of infinitely large and small structures. The first to formulate the atomic theory was Democritus, who hypothesized 2,500 years ago that everything in the world is made up of elementary, indivisible building blocks, atoms. In reality, there is nothing but atoms in space, stated the ancient scientist. Another ancient thinker, the Phoenician Moschus, agreeing with this foundational idea, went even further, advocating for the divisibility of the atom itself. His version, as we now know, was indeed closer to the truth. Leucippus, Epicurus, and Lucretius also adhered to the atomic theory. The cornerstone of Einstein's theory of relativity is the thesis, "There is no center to infinity," expressed by Lucretius in his poem On the Nature of Things. In the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, an ancient document dating back to 2500 BC, the idea of the unity of cosmos and matter is clearly traced. The sacred book of the Indians describes the birth of the world as follows: "Like mist, like a cloud of dust was creation." Modern cosmology states, "The stage began with the settling of dust particles in the central equatorial plane of a condensed cloud." As they say, no further commentary is needed. The atomic structure of matter is also mentioned in ancient Brahmanic papyri. One of them states, "Within each atom lies vast worlds, as numerous as the dust particles around the sun." This could easily be copied straight into a modern atomic physics textbook. While honoring the genius and foresight of ancient scientists, one cannot shake the troubling question, what led them to envision objects invisible to the human eye? Ancient sages understood the dangers of applying knowledge for destructive purposes. In one ancient Indian text, there is a description of a thunderbolt that turns entire armies to ash and causes hair and nails to fall out. English writer E. Thomas, in his book We Were Not the First, quotes an excerpt from the ancient book Drona Parva. It says, "A fiery whirlwind was unleashed, emitting the brilliance of a smokeless flame. Dense darkness suddenly covered the sky. Clouds billowed in the air, oozing blood. The world, scorched by the heat of this weapon, seemed to be in a fever." Another passage compares the explosion to the brilliance of 10,000 suns. In India, ancient radioactive human and animal skeletons continue to be found today. In these cases, the surrounding area has a radioactive background dozens of times lower. In the Gobi Desert, sites covered with ancient melted sand have been discovered. Around 3,500 years ago, the Indian city of Mohenjo-Daro perished due to a mysterious catastrophe. Signs of melting remain on the stones and buildings. The disaster struck suddenly as a result of a powerful explosion accompanied by a blinding light. The destroyed Indian city in many ways resembled the aftermath of Hiroshima after the atomic bomb explosion. The ancient inhabitants of India used a sexagesimal system of time measurement. They divided the day into 60 kala, each lasting 24 modern minutes. Each kala was divided into 60 vikala of 24 seconds each, and further subdivisions existed down to the smallest unit, the kashta, which equaled 1/300 millionth of a second. For what purpose could the Indians have needed such a minuscule time unit? And, more importantly, how did they measure it? Now, we know precisely that the kashta is comparable to the lifespan of certain subatomic particles. But did they already know that back then? Let's move on to a remarkable discovery that can also be classified as a challenge to modern scientific understanding. In the early 18th century, two strange maps were found in Turkey, dated 1513 and 1528. They were created by the Turkish admiral Piri Reis, but based on older, unknown sources. In 1929, the director of the Istanbul Museum handed these maps to American cartographers for study. Nearly 30 years of analysis resulted in a sensation. Scientists noticed an interesting feature. The maps contained all the necessary geographical data, but the flat depiction was somewhat inaccurate. When the maps were transferred onto a spherical globe, they were stunned. All the contours of the continents and seas immediately matched, including the coasts of North and South America, Greenland, and Antarctica, of which no one in the 16th century had any idea. It seemed that Piri Reis's maps had been created with imaging conducted from a great height from which Earth's spherical shape would have been visible. The maps even showed details, such as underwater ridges and coastal relief in Antarctica, that were only discovered in the 1950s. Moreover, it was found that these ancient maps were more accurate than those of their time. It should be noted that modern maps of Antarctica were created using seismic methods and gravimetry, as the sixth continent has been covered with a thick ice layer for 9,000 to 10,000 years, reaching depths of several kilometers. Ancient Sanskrit texts are full of stories about air travel on flying Vimana birds. The ancient Indian epic Ramayana describes Vimanas as two-story round ships with portholes and domes. Based on descriptions from travelers, this prehistoric ship could fly at wind speed, hover in the air, and make sharp turns. There is mention of fuel with a yellowish-white color. The folklore of all world nations contains strange tales of flying devices, heavenly chariots, and flying carpets. In one of his works, the monk Roger Bacon, who lived in the 13th century, left a strange comment. Flying machines, both ancient and those that exist today. Both possibilities seem incredible, though there are enough legends and tales about air travel. Chinese chronicles even mention a flight to the moon. It seems impossible, but ancient sources even provide the landing date of the first astronaut from China, 2309 BC. He flew in a place where he could not see the movement of the sun. This is a curious detail, given that only on Earth would a person visually experience the movement of the sun from sunrise to sunset, an effect created by Earth's rotation on its axis. In space, this effect disappears. Some researchers believe that in ancient times, gods from space often descended to Earth, granting certain people the privilege of visiting and traveling with them. But whether this is true or not is challenging to answer. We know little about the scientific level of the ancients, nor do we know where their knowledge came from. If the invaluable libraries had not been mercilessly destroyed in ancient times, our understanding of lost civilizations would look entirely different. During Caesar's Egyptian campaign, the unique Alexandrian library, which held hundreds of thousands of volumes and served as both a university and research center, was burned to the ground. The number of books destroyed by the Inquisition in the Middle Ages defies estimation. The priceless knowledge of the ancient Maya was lost forever when their library in Mexico was burned by the Spanish in 1549. Manuscripts in Asia fared no better. In 213 BC, all libraries in China were destroyed by imperial decree. Countless books were lost or destroyed in other countries as well. Due to these tragedies, our distant past remains a void filled with random and fragmented information. Who knows, perhaps the lost books held answers to our questions? The Americas are full of mysteries. Indigenous folklore is rich with legends of extraterrestrial visitors. A mighty army of paleo-contact detectives is searching for traces of extraterrestrial visits to Earth in ancient times. Not only enthusiasts, but also many skeptical and serious-minded scientists have been captivated by this mystery. The idea of scientifically searching for traces of extraterrestrial civilizations on our planet and other bodies in the solar system was first proposed in 1959 by the Soviet scientist Dr. M. Agrest. His main idea was this: if visitors from space ever visited Earth and made contact with people, such an extraordinary event would undoubtedly be reflected in the myths and legends of various cultures. To primitive people, astronauts would surely appear as godlike beings with supernatural powers. Such myths would naturally emphasize the heavens, stars, and the origin and return of these heavenly beings. Developing his idea further, Agrest believed that the period of extraterrestrial presence on Earth would be marked by humanity gaining certain skills and crafts, and even the basics of science from these visitors. In 1786, the famous French navigator La Pérouse visited the indigenous peoples of America. A century later, through studying folklore remnants of this visit, researchers were able to describe even the physical appearance of the ships La Pérouse arrived on. Agrest believed that many events described in the Bible could be based on extraterrestrial encounters. For example, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah resembles the effects of nuclear explosions over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Various ascensions, like Enoch's, could be interpreted as Earthlings visiting alien spaceships and traveling on them. In 1962, the famous American astrophysicist Carl Sagan expanded on Agrest's ideas, calculating possible intervals between successive extraterrestrial visits to Earth. According to his fairly arbitrary estimates, Earth is visited by alien expeditions once every few thousand years. Sagan predicted that we could expect the next visit of extraterrestrial astronauts in the near future. Most scientists in the 1960s sharply criticized the idea that certain artifacts from past eras could be the result of contact. The burden of searching for contact traces and conducting research fell on the shoulders of enthusiasts who united in an international organization for the study of paleo-contact issues. At the Third International Congress in 1976, NASA engineer Blumrich presented his research on biblical sources. Based on the prophet Ezekiel's vision, he recreated an accurate model of a spacecraft that the prophet had seen. He identified the type and structural features of the craft so professionally that he received a U.S. patent for his invention, and major companies began producing models based on his designs. The spacecraft weighed 63 tons, with a motor output of 70,000 horsepower. Interestingly, Blumrich, previously a strong skeptic, undertook this task to disprove its technical feasibility, only to find himself proven wrong. Many renowned scientists have traveled similar paths, from skepticism to enthusiasm. In 1961, a strange panel was discovered during excavations at the house of Emperor Augustus in Rome. Engineering specialists who analyzed the drawing concluded that it depicted a space rocket on a launch pad. They noted its streamlined body, distinct engine, fuel sections, and support structures. The find caused a sensation. Had the ancient Roman artist actually seen this strange object? Numerous artifacts featuring designs resembling flying devices have been found worldwide. In Colombia, a gold figurine with outlines identical to a modern supersonic airplane was found, while in Japan, stones up to 7,000 years old bear engravings resembling spaceships. Most of the artifacts featuring disc-shaped craft come from Europe. A systematic analysis of these artifacts and drawings was conducted by V. Iavinsky in the book Planet of Aliens. He highlights two phases in the development of the depicted technological devices. The first phase began around 15,000 years ago and had several periods. The second, associated with spacebound devices, started a few thousand years ago and ended in the 19th century. Both phases encompassed inhabitants of all continents. In 1901, near a small island south of the Peloponnese, sponge divers discovered a sunken ancient ship. The date of the tragedy was determined to be 65 BC. In one of the petrified blocks brought to the surface, archaeologists found fragments of a strange bronze mechanism consisting of numerous complex gears of graduating scales. All gear teeth were cut precisely at a 60-degree angle, so they fit together with extraordinary precision. Only in the 1960s did American physicist Derek de Solla Price determine the purpose of the device. It turns out it was used for complex calculations, reproducing the movement of the sun, moon, and planets. According to the inscription, the device was made in 82 BC. It differed sharply from all known modern planetary models, operating based on ancient Babylonian mathematical methods. This find radically changes our understanding of the technical capabilities of the ancient Greeks and their astronomical knowledge. It seems this apparatus came off a conveyor belt, meaning that reading information using such devices was widespread. Thus, 2,000 years ago, there was equipment for the mass production of astronomical calculators that also served as calendars. The calendar, as established, was based on the Sirius cycle known to ancient Egyptian priests. The Egyptian year, called the Year of Sirius, rounded to 365 days and 6 hours. Taking 4 of these cycles with a leap year adjustment results in the number 1461. This Sirius year was the basis for calculations on the ancient calculator found in the Aegean Sea. In 1937, during excavations in Iran, German archaeologist W. Koenig discovered a strange device made long before our era. Specialists who were given the artifact to study concluded he had found a miniature electric battery capable of generating electrical current. Tests on the artifact revealed that the galvanic cell of the ancient Mesopotamians could produce up to 6 volts and a current of up to 6 milliamps, depending on the type of electrolyte used. About 40 years ago, in an Egyptian temple, electronics engineers discovered that the temple walls depict nothing less than high-voltage insulators. The similarity to modern devices of this type was simply astonishing, and creating such an image without electronic knowledge would have been impossible. In 1885, physicist Guve found a strange object in ancient coal mines in Austria. Carefully crafted, it was a parallelogram about 7 centimeters in size. Some scientists believe this is undoubtedly a meteorite fragment that was processed about 30 million years ago. Unfortunately, after being placed in the Salzburg Museum, the object disappeared in 1910. In 1920, giant drawings of birds and animals were discovered through aerial photography on the southern coast of Peru in the Nazca Desert. The proportions of these drawings were astonishingly accurate. From the ground, it's impossible to make out the shapes, and they only become apparent from high above. One of these images depicts a giant spider, known as Riccinelli, a very rare insect. How it reproduces was only discovered in the mid-20th century. Its reproductive organ is located at the tip of its leg and is only visible under a microscope, as the insect is just 4 millimeters long. Yet this organ is included in the giant Nazca Desert drawing. Another strange but characteristic feature of all the drawings is that each was created with one continuous, unbroken line, much like a stylus connected to a computer that produces an uninterrupted drawing. The Americas are full of mysteries. 100 kilometers from Nazca, a giant trident image called the Andean candelabra is carved into the rock. It serves as an ancient directional marker, pointing directly toward the mountain. It too can only be clearly seen from the air. South of the candelabra lies the Nazca Desert, and further along in a straight line, one can reach the legendary ruins of Tiahuanaco. On the flight path in the Atacama Desert lies the outline of a human figure stretching up to 100 meters, with 12 rays extending from its head. In 1968, at the Chile-Peru border, large platforms were discovered in the mountains at an altitude of 3 kilometers. Covering an area of about 700 square meters, the platforms are made from hundreds of blocks, each carved from extinct volcanic lava, weighing about 10 tons. Traces of black scorch marks remain on some parts of the platforms, which, by the way, are still radioactive. Local indigenous people have passed down stories of mysterious flying objects emitting blinding light in these places for generations. They also claim that a tunnel beneath the platforms leads to Lake Titicaca, hundreds of kilometers away. Witnesses say that unidentified flying objects still dive into and emerge from the lake to this day. According to legend, in ancient times, a shining spaceship appeared over the lake. From it emerged a tall, four-fingered white woman with webbed fingers and an elongated skull. Her mission was supposedly to bear children who would become the ancestors of humanity. Her name was Oriona, the long-eared one. Curiously, rock carvings in Tiahuanaco and on Easter Island include long ears and narrow skulls. After fulfilling her mission, Oriona returned to her ship and departed, promising to return. This historical mystery might explain why, in the Middle Ages, indigenous Americans submitted so readily to the Spanish conquerors who arrived in search of wealth, mercilessly destroying entire Incan states. Lake Titicaca, located at an altitude of 3,600 meters, contains a submerged city with a diameter of up to a kilometer. The lake's water is highly salty and therefore an excellent conductor of electricity, the preferred environment for UFO landings. In the late 1960s, a well-equipped expedition led by world-renowned sea and ocean researcher Jacques Cousteau was sent to the lake. The expedition included 2 miniature submarines, but no results were ever published. Only in 1968 did a Chilean newspaper report that Cousteau was searching for alien ships at the lake's bottom. Native American folklore is filled with legends of extraterrestrial visitors. The Navajo tribe speaks of wise men who arrived from the sky, remained on Earth for a long time, and then returned to the sky, taking with them anyone who wished to join. The Inuit have a legend that they were brought to the cold north in giant birds. Canadian indigenous people say that before Europeans arrived, silent, round chariots flew in the sky. Similar legends exist in Japan. Many myths provide detailed descriptions of the gods. For instance, Mayan legends tell of tall, light-skinned beings with unusual clothing, which included a serpent around their foreheads, rings around their necks, helmets, and masks. In Utah, USA, rock carvings depict 2 humanoid figures with helmets and protrusions. Based on various reports, it's possible that not only extraterrestrial, but also terrestrial airships existed, one of which was constructed in China around 4000 BC. People in ancient India conducted regular space flights 3,000 years before our era and meticulously recorded them in ancient manuscripts. These ships were called vimanas, powered by mercury or a yellowish liquid. Homer's Odyssey describes shining ships, one of which Odysseus visited. The general conclusion of research conducted by scientists studying paleo-contact issues is that Earth may have been systematically visited from space at various stages of human development. The highest knowledge of the ancients was discovered in a ready-made form without evidence of a gradual scientific development process. Scientific information and technology were brought from outside. Everything points to the existence and influence of some other, possibly multiple, super-civilizations. According to Erich von Däniken's hypothesis, the gods from the heavens created Homo sapiens on Earth through artificial mutation. Unsatisfactory results were sometimes destroyed by nuclear methods, and new ones were made until the experiment was completed. According to the hypothesis of Avinsky and several other researchers, when early Homo sapiens were emerging on Earth, they were continuously monitored by extraterrestrial civilizations. As humanity matured, the supervisory role ceased and direct contacts ended. The gods essentially returned to the heavens. During a global geological cataclysm on Earth around 11,000 years ago, the Great Flood, select links survived. Apparently, they were saved by extraterrestrials who used iron birds in the form of disc-shaped aircraft for mass evacuations. Time will tell whether these hypotheses are confirmed. In any case, the search for traces of interaction between cosmic civilizations and Earthlings could profoundly influence the development of our society and culture. Stones floating above the earth? The ancient cattle herders and hunters of Britain, living 4,000 years ago, considered the earth to be not a true sphere, but slightly flattened at the poles. A long time ago, I watched a film about the ancient and majestic monument, Stonehenge. The images of two huge stones with a narrow gap between them, captured in close-up, remain etched in my memory. The filming took place in the pre-dawn hours, and the outlines of the stones blurred into the darkness. The narrator's solemn tone kept the entire audience on edge, anticipating something fascinating and unusual. Indeed, the rising sun suddenly appeared in the gap between the stones, and after a while, the perfectly aligned solar disk filled the eyes of the astonished viewers. There are seven wonders of the world: the Great Pyramid in Egypt, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the statue of Zeus in Olympia, the Temple of Diana at Ephesus, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria on the island of Pharos. But none of these use stone as skillfully as in the awe-inspiring Stonehenge. Since ancient times, it has amazed people with the grandeur of its massive constructions, which seem impossible to have been erected by human hands. In the Indian village of Shivapur, near the local temple, lie two stones. One weighs 55 kilograms, the other about 40. According to witnesses, when a specific number of people touch the stones with their fingers, while a local priest chants a particular phrase at a precisely defined pitch, both boulders rise into the air as if gravity is somehow being suppressed. Perhaps this is how all ancient monuments were moved. Serious research on Stonehenge began in 1801. Since then, it has been thoroughly excavated. Archaeological digs revealed the construction of the complex around the transition from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, approximately 4,000 years ago, and that the monument was built over the course of 300 years. Stonehenge was built in three stages. In its completed form, it represented a system of concentric circles marked by embankments, holes, and large stones. The diameter of the largest circle exceeded 100 meters. The most awe-inspiring part of the complex is the 5 trilithons arranged in a horseshoe shape. Each trilithon consisted of two 50-ton blocks topped with a lintel. Their height reached 8 meters. The horseshoe, in turn, is inside a ring laid out from stones comprised of sarsen sandstone. This round fence, 30 meters in diameter and 7 meters high, consists of 30 blocks weighing 25 tons, each and 30 stones laid on top of them. Behind it was another row of circles, enclosed by a chalk embankment 2 meters high. Throughout history, it has stirred the imagination as one of the unfathomable achievements of ancient times. Around 100 years ago, English writer Henry James created one of the most poignant descriptions of the monument. He wrote, "No one has yet managed to unravel the majestic mystery of this place. You can ask 100 questions of these roughly hewn giants, bowed in grim contemplation over their fallen comrades, and you will never receive an answer. Stonehenge has a majesty and serenity, and if you're inclined to think that life is shallow, these solemn pillars will remind you of the immeasurable depth of time." It's unlikely that this description could be surpassed. However, today, we can no longer fully agree with James on the insolubility of Stonehenge's mysteries. Under the scrutiny of the most advanced research methods, including computers, Stonehenge has already begun to reluctantly reveal the knowledge embedded in it. The mysterious grandeur of this ancient monument, its vastness, and its architectural simplicity speak to the brilliance of its design and the importance of the information its creators encoded into its structure. This information was clearly intended for someone who, one day, would be able to decipher it. The question remains, will they manage it in time? Every new discovery about Stonehenge has been so far removed from conventional common sense that it was almost immediately dismissed by official science, only to be accepted a little while later. The earliest explanations suggested that the structure was used by the ancient Britons for religious rituals. Subsequent research led to unexpected and astonishing discoveries. It turned out that the layout of the complex adheres to strict geometric proportions. The builders must have had some technical means for extracting and shaping the multi-ton stones, transporting them by water and overland from quarries dozens or even hundreds of kilometers away. Different types of minerals were selected for different rings of the complex, and the stones were installed with precision down to the centimeter. English scientist Gerald Hawkins, using computers, brilliantly proved that Stonehenge could be used as an astronomical observatory, enabling people to precisely determine the azimuths of all the key positions of the sun and moon, and to predict their eclipse dates. The arrangement of the stones, as New Zealand astronomer Beach demonstrated, also helped predict tides in ancient times. The choice of latitude for construction at 51 degrees, 17 minutes was no accident. The probability of randomly choosing this location is 1 in 10 million. Even more surprising is that, as it turned out, the ancient hunters and herders who selected the area accounted for the Earth's non-spherical shape, which is slightly flattened at the poles. If the Earth were a perfect sphere, the ideal location for the structure would have shifted slightly northeast to latitude 51 degrees, 23 minutes, an angle exactly 1/7 of 360 degrees. Amazingly, this latitude aligns with the base angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. In the 1970s, the mystery of Stonehenge attracted mathematician Valentin Tereshchin and geologist Vladimir Avinsky. Studying the plans and layouts of the structure, they discovered several hidden polygons, most notably an irregular pentagon, a pentagram, constructed based on an 11-sided figure inscribed in a circle. The number 11 played a special role in the design as a numerical module. By overlaying the pentagram on the layout, Tereshchin and Avinsky confirmed that this figure formed the basis of the complex's design. It turned out that each of the complex's rings precisely modeled the relative sizes of the planets in the solar system, accurate to within 2%. But that was not all. If Stonehenge conveys information about the diameters of the planets, could it also provide data on their distances? As it turned out, it could. Using the pentagram as a unique nomogram, this question has also been solved. According to the analysis, the boundaries of the solar system extend beyond the orbit of the farthest known planet, Pluto. If Stonehenge is to be believed, there are two more as yet unknown planets beyond Pluto, with the orbit of the farthest reaching 60 times the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Altogether, there should be 12 planets, including a possible lost planet, Phaethon, which may have existed where the asteroid belt is now found between Mars and Jupiter. The flights of the American space probes Pioneer and Voyager lend indirect support to this hypothesis. As they approach the solar system's edge, their trajectories increasingly deviated from calculated paths. American researchers Harrington and Van Flandern used computers to show that these unplanned deviations could be caused by an unknown planet beyond Pluto with a mass 10 times that of Earth. Curiously, records from the Sumerian civilization, which have survived to this day, also mention 12 planets in the solar system. The pentagram further revealed another astonishing fact. At one time, the Earth should have been 12 million kilometers farther from the Sun than it is now. If Stonehenge's plan is interpreted as a cross-section of the Earth, there is a proportional correlation between the circle sizes and Earth's layers, including the crust, mantle, and core. The analysis of the distribution of pits and stones in certain sectors using computers yielded unexpected results. The number sequences were found to synchronize with those fundamental to atomic physics. As indicated by the pentagram, the total number of elements in Mendeleev's periodic table should not exceed 120, which aligns with contemporary hypotheses. Few researchers of Stonehenge have avoided attempting to solve the riddle of the Sarsen Ring, a palisade of massive hewn stones located behind the trilithons. Each researcher has their interpretation. For instance, one suggested that several thousand years ago, hunters in England would lure buffalo into the circular enclosure. When a buffalo stuck its head between the stones, it couldn't pull it out, and the hunters, hiding inside the ring, would eagerly climb the lintel to finish the hunt. The renowned Jonathan Swift, who was aware of the existence of the Martaine moons long before they were discovered, offers us yet another clue to understanding Stonehenge's secrets. Known by his contemporaries as a satirist and pamphleteer, Swift gained worldwide fame with Gulliver's Travels. The third journey of Gulliver, to the flying island of Laputa, differs markedly from the others. It is filled with scientific and technical details that seem neither characteristic of Swift nor necessary for literary creation. They are more reminiscent of a technical report following a scientific expedition. The flying island has a perfect circular shape with a diameter of 7,837 yards. The island's height is 300 yards. Its bottom is a smooth diamond plate 200 yards thick. On the island are four symmetrically arranged basins, each about half a mile in diameter and located 200 yards from the center. At the island's center lies a shaft, but the main feature of the island, upon which its very existence depends, is a huge magnet located at the bottom of the shaft. Shaped like a weaver's shuttle, the magnet is 6 yards long and 3 yards thick in the middle. This magnet is fixed to a very sturdy diamond axle passing through its center, allowing it to turn and tilt with the slightest touch. The magnet is suspended within a hollow diamond cylinder held by 8 diamond supports 6 yards high. With this magnet, the island can rise, fall, and move in the air. When the magnet is positioned vertically, with its north pole pointing downward, the island descends. When it points upward, the island rises. With a slight tilt, the island moves in the corresponding direction, as the magnetic forces always act in parallel lines to its orientation. Naturally, a series of legitimate questions arise. What inspired Swift's description of the flying island with its fantastically powerful magnetic engine by modern standards? From what sources did a village priest glean such detailed, exact numerical parameters of the ship and technical knowledge of its movement mechanism? Clues to these questions are found in medieval chronicles, describing unidentified flying ships and edicts from French kings, Pepin the Short and Louis the Pious. Swift wrote Gulliver's Travels in 1726 when no engines existed, and the concept itself didn't even exist. Nor was there much understanding of magnetism. Upon geometrically comparing all the blocks and elements of the flying island, a clear plan of Stonehenge emerged. A detailed analysis of the island's geometry and size comparisons between its circles and blocks led to a surprising conclusion. The proportions of Laputa, thought to be fictional, used the numeric language of real Stonehenge. The structure was based on the numbers 9 and 60. The suspended magnet, shaped like a shuttle, can be compared to the altar stone lying at the center of Stonehenge. Its purpose on the site is unclear, and it consists of a different mineral than the rest of the complex. The word Stonehenge itself means hanging stone in English. An engineering analysis of Laputa's magnetic engine operating in planetary magnetic fields, compared with the symbolic and numerical information embedded in Stonehenge, confidently suggests that Stonehenge itself can be viewed as a model of an unknown flying apparatus. This electromagnetic installation employs energy released from nuclear fusion and the phenomenon of superconductivity. Individual fragments and blocks on the site can be viewed as schematics. A computing machine from the Stone Age, an interpretation proposed by Hawkins in the 1960s, no longer surprises us, especially after Moscow scientist A. Zlobin achieved astonishing results 20 years later using computers. He convincingly demonstrated that unknown engineers 4,000 years ago had geometrically laid out the most important differential equations of mathematical physics on site. Modern mathematics can only dream of such an achievement. Additionally, Zlobin used computers to produce a series of embedded visual images within the complex's layout. As the Pioneer spacecraft leaves the solar system, it carries on board information about humans, Earth, and the solar system, intended for a distant, unknown intelligence. It took countless painstaking efforts by many scientists to encode this vast information with modern digital code, compress it to the utmost degree, and record it on a metal plaque. Stonehenge's system of recorded data, its compactness, accuracy, and volume surpass even the Earth's message. In 1987, at an International Congress on Paleoastronautics, a branch of ufology that studies ancient contacts between Earth and extraterrestrial civilizations, foreign researcher Fakes presented findings on additional decoded information embedded within Stonehenge. Analysis of the structure of the complex revealed numerical astronomical data pointing to the star Beta Virginis, located 32 light-years away from us. The identified signal frequency directed toward this star aligns with the emission frequency of hydrogen. After the publication of these findings in 1988, the American company General Dynamics, known for producing aerospace technology, invited top-tier specialists from various fields of modern science and technology to work on the Stonehenge project. Phenomena on the Moon. Three flask-like luminous objects were positioned on the Moon's surface. Then two of them took off. One soon returned. In the past 200 to 300 years, various researchers have documented numerous mysterious and as yet unexplained phenomena on the Moon's surface. Strange events were also observed in the lunar sky. One example, officially recorded in the memoirs of the Paris Royal Academy, stands out. On May 3, 1715, during a lunar eclipse, flashes or brief flickers of light were observed along the Moon's western edge, as if someone were igniting trails of gunpowder. These paths were curved. These same flashes were seen simultaneously in the British Isles, ruling out any chance of misidentifying a meteor burning in Earth's atmosphere against the lunar backdrop. On August 4, 1738, a flash resembling lightning appeared on the dark part of the Moon's disk. Similar lightning bolts were seen later and detailed in the 1791 book Fragments of Lunar Topography. On October 12, 1785, a flash suddenly appeared in the center of the Sea of Rains. It didn't disappear, but instead began flickering and moving northward, accompanied by a shower of sparks similar to a Bengal firework. As the light trail faded, a new Bengal fire appeared in the same spot and followed the first. On June 17, 1931, lightning bolts were observed on the Moon for half an hour. On July 10, 1941, a bright spot was reported crossing the Moon's disk along its diameter from Canada. On September 27, 1881, a comet-like object was observed passing over the Moon from both the U.S. and South Africa. The distance between these observation points was 12,000 kilometers, meaning the object must have been no closer than 300 to 400,000 kilometers from Earth. Luminous objects were especially often observed over the Sea of Tranquility. A summary of these sightings was published in 1968 in the Chronological Catalog of Lunar Events, issued by NASA. On May 18, 1964, a white spot was seen moving at 32 kilometers per hour over the Sea of Tranquility. A month later, the phenomenon recurred in the same location. Another observation registered by the British Astronomical Society recorded a dark, rectangular object with purple edges passing over the crater Sabine. 20 days later, a bright spot again flew over this crater in the Sea of Tranquility. 6 months later, the American Apollo 11 mission landed just 100 kilometers away. Astronauts later reported that the lunar soil at the landing site appeared significantly melted, likely caused by a powerful downward jet of fire, typically observed when engine exhaust is ejected from a nozzle. Spectral analysis of lunar samples brought back to Earth, however, showed the melting was not from the Apollo landing module's engines, and the level of radiation was far greater than solar exposure alone. The same type of soil was found 1,300 kilometers away by another American mission, with analysis results from the two locations matching. NASA's catalog listed around 600 similar incidents, including moving bright spots, various geometric shapes, and elongated colored channels. None have been explained. In 1963, large objects up to 5 kilometers long were observed moving across the Moon's surface from an observatory in Arizona. Several dozen of these objects moved in strict formation, maintaining an interval. On April 25, 1972, photos were taken of a light column reaching 160 kilometers high. On March 31, 1983, a dark object with an irregular shape followed a curved path across the Moon's northwestern edge. The sequence repeated several times, with each pass across the disk's edge lasting 1 second, except for a single time when the trajectory crossed the center. Observations in the summer of 1953 made by English experts also caused a stir when they reported seeing a giant bridge over the Sea of Crises, which later disappeared. The origin and nature of domes observed on the Moon's surface remain a mystery as well, with over 200 such structures recorded so far. Despite the inability to explain them, published observations consistently noted a definite, regular pattern in the appearance, development, and disappearance of these phenomena. Astronomers claim that some kind of activity is occurring on the moon, but whose? The official reports and materials published following American lunar missions did not clarify the nature of these phenomena, despite high expectations. There are two possible explanations. Either the astronauts genuinely found nothing extraordinary during their missions, or they saw something so astounding that upon their return to Earth, officials compelled them to take an oath of silence, considering it prudent not to disclose everything. Johan de Klerk of the Belgian UFO Research Center referenced interesting details from the time American astronauts spent on the moon, which he gathered from the Book of Secrets by J. Bergier, an honorary academic of the American Academy of Sciences, and from Our Ancestors Came from Space by space communications specialist Maurice Chatelain. These books included intriguing excerpts from intercepted radio transmissions between Apollo and Earth. The first people on the moon were American astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. In June 1969, aboard Apollo 11, they delivered a small capsule to the moon containing a silver plaque inscribed by microelectrolytic method with the following information. A message to extraterrestrials in 74 languages. Excerpts from the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Excerpts from the Space Navigation Code. Standard radio frequency and call sign of the U.S. President. Standard radio frequency and call sign of NASA. However, this covert attempt at initiating contact did not elicit a response. Consequently, in 1975, NASA formed a special commission to develop a methodology for contact. Apollo was equipped with two communication channels for contact with Houston, primary and emergency, for unforeseen events. After Apollo took its orbital position, the landing module Orion separated and delivered Armstrong and Aldrin to the moon's surface. Immediately following the landing, an open broadcast began on the primary channel. Armstrong commenced a report for the American public, describing numerous small craters and what appeared to be tank-like tracks in the nearby area. The broadcast then abruptly ended. However, communications with Houston continued as Armstrong switched to the emergency channel for unspecified reasons. This conversation might have remained unknown had it not been intercepted by amateur, shortwave radio operators in various countries. Armstrong exclaimed, "What the hell is this? I want to know what it is." Right in front of us, on the other side of the crater, there are huge objects. They're on the moon. When Armstrong was later asked in Moscow, "What was your first desire on the moon?" he replied, "To leave as quickly as possible." Armstrong demanded that the main ship be ready to retrieve Orion. Further events were transmitted by Aldrin, who recorded a priceless moment on film, the encounter with UFOs. Three flash-shaped, faintly glowing objects stood opposite them. Two of them took off, while one soon returned and landed again. During Apollo 12's flight in November 1969, observatories across Europe reported two UFOs accompanying the spacecraft. One flew ahead, the other behind, emitting flashes of light. This escort continued all the way to the moon. In the Apollo 13 mission, there was a plan to detonate a small nuclear device on the moon's surface to trigger a moonquake to gather data on the moon's structure. However, the experiment was canceled to prevent any cataclysms on the moon. The crew of Apollo 14 left a surface experimental complex on the moon designed to measure the magnetic field and cosmic rays. Its power supply was expected to last a year, but it transmitted data much longer than expected, though nobody knew why. On January 18, 1976, ALSEP unexpectedly went silent for a month before abruptly resuming with improved and clearer signals. Remarkably, its power output increased, as if someone had replaced the batteries with stronger ones. Oddly enough, ALSEP had stopped receiving Earth signals a year before due to a broken receiver. Now it had suddenly resumed functioning and became fully operational again. An unusual event occurred with one of our Lunar rovers, which reportedly experienced a similar repair. ALSEP suddenly ceased all operations following the landing of the Apollo 15 module. Photographic development later revealed that a luminous phenomenon had been recorded near the landing site just as ALSEP stopped functioning. Small, strange objects flew over the heads of Apollo 15 crew members on the moon, and within their field of view was a trapezoid-shaped UFO. The last mission to the moon was Apollo 16, and it too came with surprises. After the return of the lunar module to the spacecraft, the astronauts were supposed to re-enter the main module. To do this, they needed to press a dual button to separate and jettison the module with acceleration, which would ensure that it fell onto the moon, rather than cluttering space. The astronauts, who had rehearsed this operation to perfection on Earth, suddenly forgot the sequence, pressing only the first button. As a result, the detached module did not fall to the moon, but instead became a permanent satellite. Apparently, someone did not want the moon's surface disturbed by the impact of a massive shuttlecraft. Nearby at that time, a UFO hovered close to Apollo 16. Additional moon mysteries weren't mentioned. During Apollo missions over the Aristarchus crater, astronauts detected pulsing light signals emanating from the crater upon each orbit. American astronaut Conrad stated in a newspaper interview that footprints resembling human tracks had been observed in certain areas on the moon's surface. The Apollo 8 crew, while orbiting the moon, encountered a UFO. As they approached it, they heard a high-frequency sound they couldn't tolerate. The sound was accompanied by a sharp rise in cabin temperature and blinding light. Astronaut Cernan, who flew close to the moon's far side, later claimed that they were sitting there like bees in a hive. On the moon's surface, astronauts frequently encountered parallel tracks of unknown origin, similar to tank tread marks. Even these tidbits suggest that the moon is used by an unknown civilization as an ideal staging base between a distant planet and its research object, Earth. Some scientists hypothesize that extraterrestrials have established primary bases for visiting Earth on the moon's far side, where they cannot be detected from Earth. NASA possesses about 250,000 lunar photos in its archives, but has only published a small fraction of them. As for images of the far side, there are only a few, with the rest kept securely under lock and key. Nobel laureate and chairman of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, Glenn Seaborg, wrote in his article, The Unknown on the Moon, various impressions from the Apollo astronauts prove that otherworldly visitors have already landed on the moon. Their traces are clearly visible in different locations. The moon is used as an intermediate station by them. Of course, there are many questions to ponder. Who are these extraterrestrials? Where do they come from? And how do they get here? Just how long have they been watching us? And what were they hoping to achieve by tinkering with our DNA? Within our existing paradigm, it is unlikely that we can definitively explain the facts and examples gathered from various sources and presented here. To interpret them, we must create a different conceptual framework that includes a reassessment of the accepted and well-established physical picture of the world. This audiobook is essentially an invitation to seek out non-trivial perspectives and explanations for these phenomena. We are mired in dogma, and even the slightest brush with the mysterious or even the supernatural can help us break free from these dogmas and broaden our worldview. Ultimately, it may not even matter whether visitors come to us or not. Thinking about them liberates and awakens our minds, encourages us to reflect on ourselves and our place in the universe. After all, the most important thing is us, humans, not the others, the strangers. Stay tuned for more content as we try to answer these questions. And as always, thanks for watching.